Welcome to Creative Brews. I'm Kristen, and this is your weekly dose of creativity, where photography, design, and life come together. So, grab your favorite drink, and let's talk about what's brewing. Hello! Welcome back to another episode. I want to check in with everybody, see how everybody's doing. How is everyone's 2026 going? Of course, when I'm recording this, it's still 2025 for me, but I know, like I've stated before, that my 2026 is going to be absolutely amazing. New things are coming and all that. I'm sure I will talk about it. However, enough about me. I want to know about you all. How are you all doing? How's your 2026 going? Leave all of that down below in a comment, or you can also DM me. And if you're new here, I want to say hello, welcome, thank you for being here. And of course, I hope you all are enjoying the podcast show season 2 so far. It's been amazing. We're going to talk a little bit about everything, as you all know, in the last season. I wanted to just welcome the new people. If you're new, if you're not new, thank you for supporting. It definitely helps. I can't thank you enough, and it definitely doesn't go unnoticed, like I always say. So yes, make sure you are subscribed, following. All of my links to all my social medias down below, in the description, as well as the show notes. So yes, today's episode is pretty exciting. We are going to be talking about letting go and unlearning. So shifting timelines and jumping to your new life. So if that sounds exciting to you, and if you want to know more, let's go ahead and get into it. So as you all know, I've always been very spiritual throughout my life. And recently, I've really been honing in and really diving deep and breaking apart all the newness for me, as well as what I already knew and stuff like that. So, I know it sounds funny, shifting timelines and jumping to your new life, but it is scientifically proven. I'm not going to go over the science in this episode. However, I am going to go over everyday life challenges, practical steps. Y'all already know I'm going to go over the psychology. I've been, especially recently, I have really been getting into the brain. And psychology has always been something that interests me. Fun fact, before we get into today's episode, I actually really thought about becoming a psychologist. That was before I made the decision to go to college for graphic design and photography. So, which it's funny because psychology, you have to take a psychology class for game design. And I really wanted to do game design. But I was like, well, let's start small and go into graphic design. All I have to say is if you are kind of like in between a few ideas, go for the one you want the most. Don't start small. Go in, deep. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead, and if you think big, you're going to do big. So go big or go home, right? And I definitely should have harnessed that kind of energy instead of, oh, well, I'm going to start small and we're going to start easy. Because I already knew, I was already teaching myself about graphic design. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Hindsight is 2020, and I'm here to tell you, go big or go home, okay? So, we're of course going to go over the spiritual energy of letting go, quantum timelines, if I could talk, and jumping. What does that mean and all this stuff? Of course, steps to unlearning, letting go, and jumping timelines and all that jazz. So, without further ado, I'm sure you all, and maybe not, maybe you have never felt stuck before, and if not, that's great. However, I'm sure a lot of us, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us can attest to feeling stuck at some point in time in our lives, whether that be in your work, relationships, or even your creative life. So I know for me, I've felt stuck a few times here and there, but I always like a good challenge. I'm very, a little bit about me is that I'm very aware of who I am, and I always have been. That's not to say that I've, never been misunderstood and all this stuff, but anyways, yes, I have felt stuck here and there. However, like I said, I love a good challenge. I can sometimes be hard headed. Anyways, yes, when I start feeling low energy, depending on what it is, and this right here is very much low energy, feeling stuck, and all of that in particular, that is very low energy. Yes, I'm like, okay, well, let's how can we change this? How can we think better, do better? All the things. What do I need to change? That's kind of like some of the questions that I ask myself. No matter how hard you try to change, what if the key to moving forward isn't just doing more, but unlearning old habits and letting go of beliefs that no longer serve you, right? So let's go ahead and get into some everyday life challenges and some practical steps. I hope that this episode will kind of give you, I always say this, I feel like in a lot of my episodes, but I really hope that you not only learn some new information, maybe some things to think about, but some different points of view. Shift your perspective, kind of get out of your head a little bit. I think I think we all get what I'm trying to say here. So here's some relatable examples. Repeating the same mistakes in relationships, whether that be in a relationship, it could be in your work, like I said earlier, or your creative life. Feeling blocked or uninspired. Holding on to habits that drain your energy. Those are just a few examples. I don't want to put too many. But those, yeah, are just a couple examples. The list can literally go on here. So some practical steps here to start today. Number one is to heighten your awareness. So become truly aware of yourself. I feel like that's kind of like a duh thing, but not just like with common sense and stuff like that. Not everybody uses their common sense. I hate to put it that way, but I mean, it's true, right? And not everybody is aware of themselves. So, yeah, notice your own patterns, become aware of you. Some things to try to help you become more aware of yourself. I know for some people, journaling helps. You could think of something like what keeps happening again and again and again in my life, or you could just sit and think about it, maybe reflect on yourself, maybe take some time. I feel like that would help. Number 2, start small with release. So pick one tiny habit, thought, or belief, or anything to question today, and really analyze it, sit with it, and see how you can release that. So it kind of goes along with becoming aware of yourself, but kind of those two kind of go hand in hand, I kind of think. And number 3 is to replace old habits with intentional acts. So what does that really mean? It could look like really anything. It really just depends on how you want to apply that in your life, what makes sense to you, what works. Again, I know I say this a lot in previous episodes and stuff like that, but what works for me might not work for you. So, like for me, I replaced not really being like, I was about to say, not really being, or like wanting to move, or like quote unquote working out. I don't really go to a gym. Maybe I will in the future. I kind of want to implement that into my life. It just doesn't really make sense for me at the moment. But something that an old routine that I replaced was not moving, not getting in movement with, okay, well, let's start small. Let's do a little walk around our neighborhood, stuff like that. And let's build on that. So that's one. Waking up 10 minutes earlier to meditate, that could be one. Journaling nightly or maybe in the morning with, whichever works for you, that might help. Or setting boundaries, or maybe you need a little bit of each of these, to compound with each other. So that way they kind of feed off of each other and, kind of strengthen all of them. If you kind of pick, one here, one there, and you just put them all together. But start small, especially like if you're someone like me. I really always wanted to work on moving, like, at least walking and stuff like that. So, yeah, once you get over the mental aspect, it really, 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 really feels great. Seriously. Okay, so we're going to go into the psychology of holding on. Okay, so I thought I only had one definition. I actually have a couple definitions here. A few definitions. One of them I did not look up, so I had to quickly look that up and everything. Just a few things, so that way, I sometimes have to look stuff up. I always, always, always encourage people, whether you're listening or watching, to do your own research to, understand a few pieces of information here. So, neural pathways. Neural is relating to the neurons, the cells in your brain that carry information. neural pathways, connections between neurons that form as a result of repeated thoughts, behaviors, or experiences. So here's to simply be explained. Think of neural pathways like grooves in your brain. The more you repeat a thought or habit, the deeper the groove and the easier it is for your brain to follow it automatically. This is why habits, whether it be positive or negative, feel natural over time. So, an example here, if every time you feel stressed, you scroll social media or procrastinate, your brain automatically reaches for that pattern, even if you intellectually know it doesn't serve you. Okay, so another term here, cognitive bias. So the definition is cognitive bias are mental shortcuts or tendencies to see the world in a way that reinforces existing beliefs. Common biases that keep us stuck. So here's a few common ones here: confirmation bias, negativity bias, status quo bias. I think I talked last season about a different bias. Confirmation bias, we notice evidence that supports our old beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. So here's an example. I'll never be creative. Notice only times you struggled and not successes. So you're focused on negativity, but it's confirmation in your brain. Because if you tell yourself, I'll never be creative, your brain automatically starts thinking of the struggles that you've been through, your not successes and stuff like that. Negativity bias. Our brains weigh negative experiences heavier than positive ones, keeping us in a fear-based pattern. So, negativity does weigh a lot more than positive. So, I don't really think that needs an example. Status quo bias. We prefer what's familiar even if it limits us. There's that. I think that's all of the definitions here. Becoming aware of these biases is the first step in unlearning. So if you want like a journal prompt or something like that, or just a question to think about, is where am I seeing only evidence that supports my old story? So we're going to move into some learned behavior and conditioning. We're going to kind of go over a few psychological, psychology pieces of information here. Many of our beliefs are learned from childhood, society, or culture. A lot of people will call it conditioning. I think conditioning and programming are two different things here, but they're similar. So an example is you have to work 12 hours a day to be successful, or creativity isn't practical. These beliefs can stick even if they don't fit your current life or values. So a psychological mechanism is operant. I hope I'm saying that right. Conditioning. Behaviors that were rewarded in the past. So approval, safety, success, etc. get repeated. We're going to move into some fear of change here and uncertainty. So why does letting go feel scary? Well, it's because your brain prefers safety and predictability. So stepping into something new feels risky because the outcome is unknown, or maybe you can't see obviously the outcome is unknown, so you can't see the outcome. So your brain is conditioned to keep you safe. Even if your current patterns are uncomfortable, they're predictable. So, again, your brain is just trying to keep you safe. So, an example in a daily life situation, you might stay in a toxic relationship, keep a job you dislike, or stick to old habits because it feels safer in your brain. It feels a lot more safer to your brain than the uncertainty of change. Awareness and intentional action slowly rewires your neural pathways. So, small, repeated steps create new grooves that make change easier over time. It really makes sense because if you're someone who always is negative and stuff like that, you're probably gonna, if you keep on that path, you're probably gonna become bitter. You're probably gonna get stuck in a victim mindset mentality and all of that. So that's the reason why people, talk about affirmations and stuff like that. Because if you find affirmations that are truly aligned to you and your life, which comes from awareness here, then it truly, truly, truly does make a change. But you have to truly believe, like, nobody could talk you out of not believing that affirmation. I hope that makes sense. Okay, neuroplasticity and growth. So, this is something that I've wanted to talk about. I'm not really going to go into too much detail, just kind of touch on this. The definition here, just in case you've never heard of neuroplasticity before, which you probably have, what that means is your brain's ability to change and form new connections throughout life. So, the good news here is that obviously you can unlearn old beliefs and create new patterns. You just, like I've stated before, you just have to really want that for yourself. Nobody can talk you into, unlearning old beliefs, unlearning old habits to create new patterns. You have to truly, 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 truly want that for you and your life. So, again, like I've kind of touched on before, whether that be journaling, meditation, affirmations, and consistent small habits, literally reshape your brain and allow you to move into a new timeline. I'm talking about this because moving into a new timeline and quantum jumping, all the things, all the descriptive words here to describe what I'm talking about, I have experienced. So I'm not just saying that. That is kind of why I'm talking about all this stuff. Everything I listed just a minute ago and said, you have to truly believe in these things and they have to truly be aligned to you. So that comes from you being aware and knowing yourself inside and out. So, I mean, an example here, you could spend 5 to 10 minutes a day practicing a new habit. Starts building a new neural pathway, right? So, replacing the old one with the new one, replacing the old habits and patterns with new habits and patterns. I believe I explained this a little bit, just a little bit ago, but just in case, Of course, like I said before, new habits carve new neural pathways. Repeated emotion experiences can rewire your perception of reality. So, your thoughts plus feelings plus actions create new defaults. So, that is why this is really powerful. And that's the reason why I did the mindset myth on the fake it till you make it, because sometimes it's easy to get into that kind of mindset and kind of get stuck sometimes, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to kind of go back for a minute because I want to also talk about the some of the everyday life stuff. Like, I know for some people will say that's just how I am, and all that. That's, yeah, I know it's just a saying. I get it. I don't take all of these things to heart, just to let everybody know. But I just know how easy it can be to just say that, or say something like, oh, well, that's just how I am. That's just my luck, and all of that stuff. So, an example is that you want to wake up early in the morning and move your body, but the story you're still holding is, I'm not a morning person. That's just how I am. That kind of thing. So it can really keep your brain is a tricky place, a tricky organ, because it can really keep you stuck. It can really keep you comfortable and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of this stuff, like, you finally make the changes and you change your life when you are like, okay, I'm tired of this. Like, we've got to change something. So, yes. As well as identity attachments, I wanted to talk about as well. So, comfort zones masquerading as safety, and identity attachments. So, yeah, like I said, your brain just wants to keep you comfortable in what it knows, even if that is a terrible place. Your brain doesn't care about your happiness, it cares about predictability. So that's the reason why change is very uncomfortable, because you have to override your system and do something different, choose differently. Every day we make choices. Every day we have a choice whether we want to keep living the way we're living or make changes. That is the power that we all hold. That is already within us. Even if you're like, well, I don't know what changes to make. If you sit with yourself and reflect on yourself, and I mean, like, truly, you will know what changes to make, because those changes will be pulling you in that direction. I hope that all makes sense. So yeah, you stay in routines, even if they're draining, because again, your mind just wants to keep you safe, keep you comfortable. Like I said before, I think I used this before, staying at a job you hate because the discomfort is familiar. While the unknown feels scary, terrifying, you don't know what other job you would be doing if you weren't doing that job. You know what I mean? So let's move into identity attachments. The biggest block to letting go is your identity that you've built around your habits. So some examples is, I'm the strong one, I'm the broke creative, I'm the anxious one, etc. But letting go means letting go of who you think you are. You can always reinvent yourself. You don't always have to be the strong one. Believe me. I think I've said that to myself a couple times. Well, I'm the strong one. Or, well, I've got to be the strong one. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's whenever you start looking at all this stuff, it's just crazy to do a deep dive into your brain and why it does what it does and and all this stuff. But like I said, every day we choose, we have choices. If you heard that, that was my cat. Who I usually have to usually she's asleep somewhere, but she is, like I said, that annoying best friend that you didn't ask for. I know that might sound terrible, but that is her personality to a T. So let's go ahead and move into spirituality, unlearning energetically, what that means. So we, as I've spoke about before, are all energy. We're all on a different frequency, which is why you mesh well with some people, but not other people. If you've ever wondered why I just don't get along with that person or they get on my everlasting nerve, it's probably because they're on a different frequency. They are on a different frequency than you. Maybe. So that could be something to look at. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying that's probably what's going on. There's other stuff too. That's not the only thing. So, yes, everything you hold mentally also shows up energetically. Guilt, shame, people pleasing, fear, outdated dreams, old versions of you, the list could go on. Frequency and alignment. So your thoughts plus emotions equal your frequency. Your frequency determines what you attract and what timeline you align with. So, an example is if you want to live in your creative, confident, entrepreneur, author, the list can go on here, timeline, but you're still running the I'm not good enough or that cost money that I don't have or something like that frequency. The timelines don't match, so there's a mismatch there. Letting go is energetic clearing. Your energy carries the patterns, the habits that you create your reality with or on or, So attachment and surrender from the perspective of like a spiritual perspective, releasing control doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that the universe or your higher self or God or whatever you call your higher being has a better plan. It's having faith. It's believing in miracles. It's being delusional, woo woo, whatever you want to call it. So here's a metaphor. Imagine carrying a backpack of old beliefs and resentments. And let me just tell you, everybody has their own, I can't think of the name that I'm looking for, but your own baggage, I think that might be the word I'm looking for. It's heavy, exhausting, and slows you down. Letting go is setting the backpack down. But also, again, keeping in your mind that you're trusting in the universe or your higher self, the higher you that's vibing higher, that they have a better plan. God, like I said, whatever you call your higher being. Maybe a limiting belief you released, and what shifted afterward. So that's also keeping you stuck, is limiting beliefs, which you also have to figure out within yourself how to release that. So notice how your body feels and stuff like that. And I think whenever you sit down and finally, really reflect within yourself and you really check in with yourself, because that's what I have to do every day. It's an everyday thing. It's not just a, here and there thing. Maybe it is for you. Maybe that's what you need to work on, but only you will know that. I check in with myself every day. How are we doing? How are we feeling? That kind of stuff. So, yes, surrender versus force. Letting go isn't passive, it's releasing resistance so something new can flow in. It's remaining neutral, not forcing. You cannot force a square into a circle. And a lot of times you have to shed your identity and again, reinvent yourself. I would say, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I know based off of me, it seems like every 7 to 10 years, not only do your taste buds change, but I've noticed that I like reinvent myself. Okay, how can I better myself? I check in with myself, I reflect, and all those things, and usually big changes happen. If you really truly do this to what's aligned with you and your life, your schedule, all these things, it truly does change. It makes some big changes happen. That's all I've got to say. So let's go into timelines and all of that, quantum jumping. These are a few things that I've heard here and there. Okay, so let's do some chit-chatting about timelines here. Hopefully this isn't going to be a long episode, but it might be. There's just a lot of information and stuff like that, which is why I do encourage everyone to do your own research. You can ask me some questions. So timelines, most people think a timeline means some mystical sci-fi alternate universe, but spiritually and psychologically, a timeline is simply a version of your life that becomes available based on a few things here. It's basically based on everything we've been talking about. Based on your identity, beliefs, patterns, habits, choices. Okay, so I have an example here. So think of your life like a highway. Every exit is a possible timeline, right? So some exits might lead to more aligned creativity, more abundance, more peace, a healed version of you, a confident you, a stagnant version of you, a fearful you, all these different aspects of life. You don't access a timeline just by wishing. You access it by behaving or by being the higher vibing you, not the low vibing you, but by behaving on the frequency that timeline operates on. So you could think of it as sort of a formula, sorta. Not really, but kinda maybe. A timeline equals what you believe is possible, what you emotionally expect, what you energetically allow, and what you consistently choose. Like I said, we all have choices every single day. Timelines are not random. They are actually scientifically proven. Again, I'm not going into the science maybe that'll be in a future podcast episode. And they respond to identity. So that's the reason why if you want to start your own business, or maybe you want to be an author or podcast, whatever it is, podcast is a little easier, but that's why they always say act like the you that already has the thing, whatever it is. It could be anything, seriously. So act like the higher vibing you that already has that life, that already has that business, that already is an author, whatever it is. So here are a few other things to mention here. You are always on a timeline, whether you know it or not. A default timeline, which could be old conditioning, or a chosen one, which could be an aligned reality. So you shift timelines all the time by making different choices, by reinventing yourself, by all the things that we have talked about in this episode. Every shift in whether it could be self-worth, I about said self-love, self-worth, or boundaries, habits, patterns, thought patterns, emotional baselines. It moves you into a different version of you, of your life. You're not waiting for the timeline. You're aligning to the timeline. Does that make sense? I think it does. So we're going to move into quantum jumping. Quantum jumping is not teleporting. It's identity transitioning. It's the moment you emotionally and mentally, because your emotionally, like your emotions and your mental state have to align with a version of you that already exists. And believe it or not, we just talked about timelines. There are, I believe they say there's 3 versions of you. I could be wrong. But there is a low vibing you, a current you, and a higher vibing you. Okay, so the deeper grounded explanation for quantum jumping is when you shift to a new internal state so profoundly that your external reality has no choice but to reorganize around you. It's your identity updating. So, quantum jumping has 3 components: identity shift, emotional calibration, and behavioral alignment. For identity shift, you shed the identity of the old timeline. You embody the identity of the new timeline. So you can ask yourself, who am I in the timeline I want to live in? Then start acting like them. So that is pretty important and actually pretty big. That is the reason why people say, instead of just, acting like the person that you want to become, it's more so not just acting and pretending, it is embodying, whether that be the version of you that is the business owner, the version of you that is an author, the version of you that goes to the gym and all this stuff. So you have to truly embody that person mentally, emotionally, all of that. Physically, Number 2, like I said, emotional calibration. Every timeline has a frequency. You tap into it by cultivating the emotions that version of you feels daily. So, again, not just pretending and acting like you're on a set of a movie. It's more so, like I said, embodying, embracing, truly diving into the version of you mentally, emotionally, and all that stuff. So maybe that version of you is calm, confident, creative, worthiness, expansion, flow, all of these things. So you really have to sit down and really envision. If you want your life to change, if you want to be a different version of you, a higher vibing you, you have to really embrace, embody, envision. You don't feel confident after the jump. So honestly, I don't know about anybody else, but when you're about to quantum jump, it does not feel, it feels uncomfortable, honestly. So, but, and, it doesn't feel comfortable, I guess, per se. Like, it kind of feels a little scary, but you know that deep within you, you are making the right decision. It feels right and all this stuff, but just because it feels right doesn't mean it's not scary. That's from my experience. Behavioral alignment, so your actions must reflect the identity you are stepping into. So you can't say I'm stepping into my abundant timeline while behaving from fear, scarcity, or avoidance. That's all lack energy. Again, that's lack frequency. So you are coming from and grounded in a place that has lack energy. So you're not going to be able to just say that. You know what I mean? It's not just something you say. It's not just something you say over and over and over and over again. It's something you say plus truly embodying, embracing, envisioning that particular version of yourself. So actions anchor the jump. So the real secret here is quantum jumping is energetic and practical. It's spiritual and psychological. It's emotional and it's behavioral. So, like I said, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but it's embodying, embracing, and envisioning. Truly, truly, truly within you. It feels right, but it feels kind of scary all at the same time. And you know that it feels right within you. Like nobody can tell you or can talk you out of doing whatever it is, even though it does feel a little scary. So here's some practical steps to shift your timeline if that's something you're trying to do, or maybe you're in the middle of a quantum jumping situation, quantum leap. So I would say step one is identify your current timeline. Ask yourself a few questions. What patterns am I repeating? What emotions do I wake up with most days? What do I expect from life? What identity am I living from? Your current reality really reveals your current timeline. So again, you have to check in with yourself, but not only that, but get like real. You have to get real with yourself and peel back these layers. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And you're just going to be lying to yourself more than anything. Step two, define your target timeline. So a lot of people skip this. But the thing is you need clarity with all of this. So you could ask yourself, what is the version of me I'm trying to become? Okay, because again, it's you got to identify that version of you. So if you're trying to become a higher vibing you, you have to sit down and really get real with, okay, well, what would their habits be? What would their energy be? Confidence, boundaries, vision, emotional baseline, lifestyle, mindset. Like, this all I know is going to sound like a lot of information, but I really want you guys and everyone that's tuning in to really listen to all of this with an open mind, open heart, and really just sit with it. Maybe come back and maybe listen to some of this or listen to all of it, digest it, maybe come back, listen again, because I know, I don't know about you all, but I know for me personally, sometimes when I'm new to something and I'm like, wow, that sounds crazy or it sounds great or whatever the case is, sometimes I have to think about it, really break it down and make it make sense to me and then come back and be like, oh, okay, I get it. So but with all of that being said, that version of you, once you identify all of what I said, this becomes the frequency blueprint. So once you really sit with yourself and say, you know what? I am a new business owner. What does that version of me not only look like, feel like, what, their habits, their energy, confidence, boundaries, all these things, that becomes your blueprint, your frequency blueprint. Okay, so I'm going to have to split this one into two parts. So tune in for part 2 of the letting go and unlearning episode. As you all may or may not know, I tend to talk quite a bit, especially when the topic is very interesting and I'm super interested, so I tend to be a little long-winded. But, like I said, make sure to tune in next Monday for part 2 of this episode. And yes, I hope everybody has an amazing week, and please remember to rate and subscribe to the show. And yeah, I will see you all in part 2. Bye.